Before I start the video, I want to give a huge thanks to my patrons, Sadiq Udin, Joypad Jake, and Clay Calderon. Let me know in the comments below how you pronounce that. Thanks so much for supporting me on Patreon. If you want to support me on Patreon, just to generally support me, but also to most of the time get videos a couple hours or maybe even a couple days early, then sign up. Link will be in the description down below. With that out of the way, let's start the video. The Arrowverse has always been a relatively incomplete DC universe. It started as just the Green Arrow side of things, but it quickly expanded to the Flash, Superman, alternate universes, and eventually Crisis on Infinite Earths. But after Crisis on Infinite Earths, you would think it would be a more complete universe because they merged a couple universes together, and now it's called Earth Prime. But even now, things are missing. Aquaman has only ever been mentioned once, and with like Atlantis references, it doesn't really add much because we haven't ever seen Aquaman at all. Wonder Woman 2 was only ever mentioned once, plus we saw a Themyscira cameo. But other than that, those are two characters, very, very large characters in the DC universe that are completely missing, and as far as we know, have never teamed up or met any of the other characters that we know. There's no Justice League, at least not one in name. The Teen Titans also nowhere to be found, and despite being called Earth Prime, there's just a lot of key aspects of the DC universe that are completely missing, including technically Batman. Batman technically has appeared, and the Batman side of the universe is certainly being explored quite a bit with Batwoman, but Batman himself isn't really much of a character in this universe, which is a huge shame because, like, Batman is usually the center of the universe. Just look at the DC comics right now, it's almost entirely Batman, which is a bit of an exaggeration. That is too much Batman, but you can't have the DC universe without Batman, and this one just barely has him, which it's also a huge shame because this is a character that's been built up in this universe quite a bit. There were hints since the very beginning. I've made a couple very successful videos on this topic. All the hints and references and Easter eggs and also direct mentions of Bruce Wayne or Batman that date back to season 1 of Arrow. It was usually just like a mention of Gotham City or maybe something from the Batman comics, but isn't like a character or something like that, or maybe a person who sounds like he might be like Batman. But there wasn't any official name drops until season 6 of Arrow, where Oliver Queen referenced or mentioned Bruce Wayne. And then we had the Elseworlds crossover the following year, which basically turned Bruce Wayne into a character instead of a reference, where Flash, Green Arrow, and Supergirl visited Gotham City and Arkham Asylum, and were helped by Batwoman. Back then I thought that this crossover, the appearance of Gotham City, Arkham Asylum, Batwoman, all these things would signify Batman finally appearing. And while since then he technically has had a cameo or two, I don't think any of these appearances can be called anything other than a waste, because we've had 3 seasons of Batwoman, and we've had barely any Batman. We've had less Batman in Batwoman than we had Superman in Supergirl in the first 3 seasons, and even that felt like not enough Superman until Crisis on Infinite Earths and his own show. Ever since then, we did get a few appearances, the first of which is in the pilot episode of Batwoman, where we see a flashback of Batman attempting to save a young Kate Kane, her sister, and her mother, but we only ever really see snippets of him, plus he's played by a stunt double. At this point, he didn't have an actor yet, which is the exact same thing, or the same case as Superman in Supergirl, where we see snippets of him. He's mostly made out of CGI, or maybe there's a stunt double, or a body double, and he didn't get an actor until season 2. Batman was a bit ahead of Superman in this regard, as he was cast for the season finale, played by Warren Christie. The problem is that he wasn't actually playing Bruce Wayne in this episode or in his follow-up episode in the first episode of season 2. He was playing Tommy Elliott, aka Hush, who disguised himself as Bruce Wayne. That being said, though, at least we do now have an actor who is the face of Batman in the Arrowverse. The Arrowverse Batman is played by Warren Christie, if he were to ever appear, which he technically kind of did in a dream sequence in season 2, where Luke Fox was like on the verge of death, and he talked to a dream sequence version of Bruce Wayne, who was also played by Warren Christie. But that's really the extent of his appearances as Batman. It includes 2 Tommy Elliott disguised as him appearances, which are for 2 episodes, as well as a dream sequence in season 2. That's all we've gotten from official Warren Christie Batman appearances, and none of them are actually in the flesh or like in the present day or real or him. and that's less than what we got from Superman as of season 2. As of season 3, we also didn't really get anything else from Superman or this version of Bruce Wayne, so it isn't really relevant. In terms of season 2, Superman definitely had more appearances in the second season of Supergirl than Batman did in the second season of Batwoman, which I think is a fair comparison because these are very similar situations. Now, we do know things about this version of Batman's past. We know that he had a Robin who was killed by the Joker. That's most likely Jason Todd, and if he had a Robin who was Jason Todd, then he also had a Robin who was Dick Grayson. We know he also killed the Joker in 2015, and soon after he left Gotham City, probably because he killed the Joker and he crossed that line that he swore that he never would. We also know that he basically became Batman around the year 2000, or at least before the year 2003, so he was Batman for a good decade plus before he basically retired in 2015. We also know that he faced off against a lot of villains like Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze, and we also know about the fact that he faced off against Ra's al Ghul, retconning it so that he didn't fight Green Arrow before anybody else and then die. He was a Batman villain and then maybe moved on, maybe gave up on Bruce Wayne and moved on to Oliver Queen. But we do know a good amount about Batman's backstory and his like 15-year career up until 2015. But we don't really get a lot in terms of on-screen things. It's mostly just mentioned. And Elseworlds was like 5 years ago. Back then, like I said, I expected Batman to have some sort of a role down the road. I expected like maybe 2 years from then for him to actually appear. And yeah, again, he's had appearances. There's also the Kevin Conroy version of Batman in Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's certainly more than what we had before. But I think at this point we have gotten less than what I expected, especially comparing his role to Superman's on Supergirl. I definitely expected him to have basically the same thing. Maybe he actually does appear for like 3 or 4 episodes in season 2 of Batwoman, but we've barely gotten anything, and that's such a waste. Now sure, we could get something like Superman and Lois, where in 2 or 3 years when Batwoman is close to ending, or maybe that's about to happen now, we get a Batman TV show which maybe could be as good as Superman and Lois. That would be insane. But I do think that now is the perfect time to have that, not only because Superman and Lois and Batman being like airing at the same time would be something that would be fantastic, because I mean, imagine the crossover potential, but also because I don't really want to see 6 years of the Gotham City side of the Arrowverse being as wasted as it currently is, wasted with Batwoman as the main bat. Not only is Batwoman easily the least compelling member of the Bat family, or one of the least compelling members, behind all the Robins, the Batgirls, and of course Batman himself, but it's not even the comic book Batwoman anymore. She's been replaced by Ryan Wilder. I get why they replaced the actress Ruby Rose. There were problems there, but I think they should have recast her. And while I do technically think Ryan Wilder is a better character than Kate Kane was in season 1, I think Kate Kane has a lot more potential if they just recast her. I never liked Ruby Rose in the role anyway, because she has that connection to Bruce Wayne while Ryan Wilder absolutely doesn't. But aside from Batwoman herself, there are other aspects of Batman's world that have basically been kind of systematically eliminated, like the Joker, Mr. Freeze, and Lucius Fox are all been confirmed to be dead. Ra's al Ghul is also technically dead, but that's from Arrow. Jim Gordon has been confirmed to be retired as commissioner, and like Jason Todd was the last Robin, so Tim Drake and Damian Wayne, at least as of now, don't seem to exist. And of course, Batman left Gotham already 7 years ago. All that being said, I do think that there is a way to make a Batman show that it has all of this canon and all this continuity. The show probably wouldn't ever include all the villains that have been confirmed to be dead unless they bring them back, or maybe they retcon something like Superman and Lois did do a couple times. But I think that they could use the fact that Batman's been missing for a while, like something like The Dark Knight Returns / The Dark Knight Rises used, into its canon, into its idea, and I do have an idea for how that could work. First of all, my idea is to confirm, which is something that's been hinted at quite a bit, which is that Jason Todd's death in 2015 led to Batman killing the Joker and then going into exile because he killed the Joker. Those are 3 separate events: Jason Todd dying, Batman killing the Joker, and Batman going to exile, which probably all happened around the same time. The last 2 both happened in 2015. that have never been confirmed to all be connected to each other as far as I know, so this would confirm that they all are. And the fact that Batwoman, the TV show, ends and Gotham is back to having no vigilantes. They could follow all that up with a first season of an Arrowverse Warren Christie Batman show, which I would call Batman and Robin, where Tim Drake figures out Batman's true identity, where he is, and he goes to convince him to return. He does this because there's a new villain called the Red Hood who is causing chaos in Gotham. This is, I think, a great way to tie everything together. Jason's death, Batman's disappearance, the fact that Jason Todd was the last Robin, meaning Tim Drake is the next one, plus the fact that Tim Drake in the comics finds out who Bruce Wayne is by himself through detective work, or who Batman is rather, and here we would add on that he would also find out where Batman is, because he's such a great detective, which also adds on the fact that somebody finds Bruce finally and convinces him to return. I think it's perfect, but it's something that they have to do soon, as if they wait a couple of years, it might be too late for this timeline, and maybe by then Warren Christie will be a little bit too old to play Bruce Wayne or Batman, as the show would just be beginning. Right now, he's the same age as Ben Affleck, so I think it could work. Until then, though, which is something that I don't think will actually ever happen, I think the Arrowverse has completely wasted Batman, as well as a lot of other DC characters, but Batman's the one that they've built up for a while, and, like I said, failed to live up to all those hints and references that I basically started my channel on. It's a shame.